Hello and welcome to World Talks on TVP World with me, Ashim Kumar. President Donald Trump's recent decision to pause military aid to Ukraine has raised significant questions about the future of US support. We'll also discuss whether Ukraine can continue to defend itself without this crucial backing and what role Europe might play. Joining us to analyse these developments is MacKay. He's joining us from Canada. He's an independent analyst with expertise in the area. Welcome, Michael. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
So let's start with the big one, I suppose. Your view on President Trump's decision to pause aid to Ukraine.
Well, my first reaction is that it's inexplicable. It just defies explanation, and that's why people are struggling to try to make sense of it. Of course, it is a disaster because it withdraws crucial support to defenders at a time when they need it the most. I think the explanations coming from Trump administration officials that this will somehow bring peace is something that only that tiny group of people seem to believe, if in fact they do believe it, they say it. The Russians see it as a way to boost their offensive and increase their opportunities on the battlefield. Ukrainians see it as imposing a tremendous impediment on their successful defense. And European allies see it as basically a shattering of a consensus that has developed and held in Europe since 1945. So I think it's a disaster all around.
A disaster all around. What would get this disaster removed, in your opinion, Michael? What would need to happen?
I think we have to draw attention, or somehow the Trump administration has to see what the response of the Russian invaders is going to be to this. They are not going to agree to a ceasefire because of this. In fact, it's most likely to do the opposite, to launch new offensives. They are not going to come to the bargaining table because they've never been asked to give up anything by the administration. So I think the thing that will remove this or alleviate this horrible disaster is if somehow common sense prevails and the people that matter, the people who have stopped this crucial military aid, see that it is in fact inflaming the war and is the opposite of a roadmap to peace.
Okay, do you think this could possibly be yet another negotiating tactic by Trump to cause some short-term pain, to get Zelensky onto the, to the table and get the mineral deal signed, which apparently it has been or is about to be? Could that be the chain of events?
I think we're reading too much into it if we think that Trump has a master plan. He has no impulse control and simply acts on impulse. He sees his opportunity to extort the minerals from Ukraine, as he tried a similar deal in 2018, of course, which led to one of his impeachments. But he sees a richer opportunity now that there's no one to stand in his way. But is it part of a negotiating tactic? No, I don't think Trump sees more than 1 hour ahead of time. So that is most unlikely.
Okay, now, as I say, there are reports that Trump is expecting to make a statement to Congress today in his address. And in that statement, he's going to say that the minerals deal is done. Have you heard anything about this?
Some people are saying that, and it might be true. But I think if it is, it's an empty gesture because, so first of all, it doesn't come with any security assurances for Ukraine. And it actually really doesn't commit Ukraine to anything now other than vague commitments in the future after a peace, which Trump is not going to get by his actions. So I think if the Ukrainians agree to it, I think they're probably doing the smart tactical thing, because this is not a hill to die on. So they'll say, sure, we'll sign this deal, but it won't lead to anything for Trump short term, and he's going to react very badly to that.
Do you think that with an American investment and presumably American people working that investment on the ground in Ukraine, that in itself is a security guarantee of sorts? No, it's not, because it doesn't address the occupied territories. It's that in itself is I think it's empty. Okay. What about Europe, Michael? What about Europe? I mean, are they prepared? I mean, let's assume for a second that the pause becomes longer than we hope. Is Europe prepared to step into the gap in terms of aid for Ukraine?
I think it is. And I think the possibility is there. We're starting to hear the right voices featured most prominently. I'm thinking, for example, of the Prime Minister of Denmark and other voices, Prime Minister of the UK leading that conference on Sunday. There was, of course, the Support Ukraine conference in Kiev a few days before that. So I think we're starting to hear the right voices. But I think what we do need to see is some action and not words. And that's what everyone is clamoring for. So, for example, will the EU take any action against Hungary for its latest blocking of aid to Ukraine? Or will they invoke Article 7 of the EU treaty? Questions like this, I think the possibility is there. Certainly the people of Europe that sustain these governments have had enough, and they've been dealt a stunning blow by the turning of the United States towards the Russian Federation. And I think the possibility is there, and we'll be looking literally within the next few days for action.
Action in terms of?
In terms of rearmament, in terms of, for example, an expeditionary force to Ukraine, shelter the skies, which has been necessary since 2022. The simple things.
And who do you see doing that, Michael?
Over Poland and Romania. Stop with that nonsense and defend your countries.
Right. Who would you see doing that, defending the air or providing a safe sky? Do you see a collection of nations or just one?
I see a collection because that gives diplomatic cover. I would say France and Britain, and I would not have said Germany, but now with the new government coming in, that is a possibility as well. So these are the natural leaders of an initiative like this, to shelter the skies.
Right, so Keir Starmer has called out a coalition of the willing. I mean, of course, the major risk that's at the back of everyone's minds is, well, what happens if a European plane gets shot down or a soldier is killed? Does that trigger NATO's Article 5? What would you say to that?
No, if it's not done under the auspices of NATO, then why would that be the case? These are sovereign countries. They're able to act individually or collectively, and NATO doesn't constrain them from their duty to defend their own sovereignty. So, no, I don't see that at all as a risk.
Okay, so in terms of staying with Europe now, Poland, of course, has the highest spending on defence in Europe, 4.7% of GDP. Are there lessons that other European countries can take from Poland to tool up for the threat that is so obvious now that they've decided they're finally going to do something?
Yes, absolutely. And Poland has definitely shown leadership on this, not only on the spending as a proportion of GDP, but also on equipment spending. You probably know there's a 20% minimum recommendation of that money for that, and Poland exceeds that as well. So I think Poland is a model. Statements by the Danish Prime Minister, her instructions to her defense minister, buy, and is the right kind of thing. I've been very critical of my own government in Canada for being a laggard in this regard. The government in Canada is weak at the moment. It's a minority government, and the governing party is going through a leadership role. But still, time is pressing, and I think, and I've publicly called on the government to follow Poland's lead. The excuse of, Poland borders the Russian Federation is not an excuse. Canada, in a way, borders the Russian Federation over the Arctic as well. And I think we need to take it seriously. And I think Eastern European countries and the Nordic countries and some of the Western European countries are taking it seriously. And I think that's an example to laggard countries like Canada.
Okay, understood. Now, you mentioned buy, but when is Europe going to start make?
Well, they better do that, because we see the problems the Ukrainians have had with all these restrictions on the use of weapons based upon their country of origin. And which is why Ukraine has needed to get flexibility on the battlefield, which they have to have. Take, for example, their domestic drone production. Well, because they make it in Ukraine, they can do what they want. And they've been very successful now conducting long-range strikes into the territory of the invaders. So make, absolutely. And it's got to be free of these licensing restrictions and country of origin restrictions, especially since the United States is not an ally and may in fact be an enemy, and that's going to persist for some time. And that needs to be the new reality for European defense.
Well, I think many would agree with you, Michael. The question, of course, is how long will it take for this to actually come to fruition? Michael MacKay, independent analyst, thank you very much for sharing your analysis with our audience. Have a good day.
Thank you for having me.
Bye-bye now. That's all from this episode of World Talks. Goodbye.